Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Two new works take a creative personal approach to understanding culture, identity, and what it takes to not just survive, but to thrive under adverse circumstances. Sherman Funmaker unveils his debut collection of poems and essays called Bear Tracks, and acclaimed Inupiaq poet Joan Kane draws from her experiences in Alaska, Massachusetts, and elsewhere for a compelling collection with snow pouring southward past the window. We'll hear from both writers coming up after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Jill Freitas. All 11 federally recognized tribes in Wisconsin have seats on a new committee aimed at protecting wild rice. Chuck Quirmbach reports.
Democratic Governor Tony Evers has announced his 24 appointees to the Wild Rice Stewardship Council. One member, Gloria Wabagwan Wiggins, is a member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and works for the group Wisconsin Native Vote.
I've been harvesting wild rice, manumin, with my husband for the last 9-10 years. Our powwow, the celebration of manumin, is in August, so that's a very important event for our community.
Wiggins says wild rice is also part of a sacred migration story for the Anishinaabe, indigenous people of the Great Lakes region. But tribal and state officials report low production of wild rice in recent years due to factors like windstorms and very heavy rainfall, and long-standing threats like water pollution and excessive waves from boats. Another member of the new Stewardship Council, Eric McLester, helps direct environmental policy for the Oneida Nation. He says the big picture concern is climate change.
The amount of rain, water levels, important to not have huge increases or decreases in water level. Drought certainly impacts wild rice beds.
McLester says the Oneida have restored about 35 acres of wetlands for wild rice production in recent years. It's also possible the committee will propose new regulations to protect wild rice. For National Native News, I'm Chuck Quirmbach.
A First Nations family in Canada is demanding answers after 24-year-old Jaylee Sutherland-Weenie died during childbirth after reportedly being diagnosed with preeclampsia while 36 weeks pregnant. Family members say Sutherland-Weenie from Beardy's and Okamasis Cree Nation in Saskatchewan sought medical care in the days leading up to her death and raised concerns about symptoms linked to the dangerous pregnancy complication. Sutherland-Weenie first went to a hospital in Rosthern before being transferred to Jim Pattison Children's Hospital and later to the Labor and Delivery Unit at Royal University's Hospital in Saskatoon, where she died on April 26th after giving birth to her daughter. According to the Mayo Clinic, preeclampsia causes high blood pressure during pregnancy and can quickly become life-threatening for both mother and baby if not closely monitored and treated. Her death is now drawing attention from Indigenous advocates and community members who say Indigenous women continue to face inequities in maternal health care and are too often dismissed when reporting pain or complications. Loved ones are calling for accountability and a full review into what happened. Community members have also taken to social media to share condolences and call for better protection for Indigenous mothers navigating the healthcare system. The Saskatchewan Health Authority says a review is underway. Blaine Morin, Sutherland-Weenie's partner, said during a news conference held at the Wanuskewin Heritage Park in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan earlier this week that he plans to attend her graduation ceremony next month to accept her degree on her behalf. Morin says the couple wanted to build a better life for their daughter than the ones they experienced growing up.
The family and I will be attending her convocation next month, taking her degree, and we planned so much for our baby before she made her appearance here. We didn't want her to grow up like how we did, breaking the intergenerational trauma.
Sutherland-Weenie leaves behind a newborn daughter and a grieving family, now hoping her story raises awareness about the warning signs of preeclampsia and the importance of timely medical care. I'm Jill Freitas.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, hosting today's show live from Anchorage, Alaska. Inupiaq poet Joan Kane's latest poetry collection, With Snow Pouring Southward Past the Window, challenges readers to think critically about life in the Arctic. Kane comments on topics ranging from Alaskan traditions to deeply personal reflections. Her work also explores the complexities of indigenous languages. Several poems are written in the Inupiaq language, specifically the dialect of her village of King Island. Today on our show, we'll discuss Kane's latest work, but first, we'll hear from Ho-Chunk elder, writer, and poet Sherman Funmaker. His debut collection of poems, essays, and photos explores his life and family in Wisconsin, offering a deeply personal look at culture, family, and community unique to Native Americans. Listeners, you can join this conversation today with Funmaker and Kane. Share your comments or questions by calling us at 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE, and you can also post comments on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and also Threads. Joining us now from Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin, is Sherman Funmaker. He is a poet, a writer, a Bear Clan elder, and author of Bear Tracks, Memories of a Ho-Chunk Elder. And of course, he is a citizen of the Ho-Chunk Nation. Sherman, welcome to Native America Calling, brother. Great to have you on the show today.
Hey, thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Well, Sherman, a creative writing course in the early 2000s helped you find a voice as a writer. How did that early work evolve into this memoir?
Well, I went to university, like I said, in 2002, and while I was there, I took a creative writing class, and I'd never really written anything before. I had no training, nothing like that. I just took this class, and I had to start writing stuff to hand in, so I just started making up stories and, just writing about, what I knew was like native life in Wisconsin, growing up here, and growing up Ho-Chunk, and so that's kind of where it started, where just kind of pulling stories out of my head, looking at pictures of my family, and just kind of coming up with different poems or short stories. So that's kind of where it came from, with just the classes that I took.
Well, speaking of short stories, there is a collection of short stories that are a supplement to the memoir. They're titled Fish Tales. Tell me more about how they came about and what's their connection to your own life.
Well, I had to hand something in, and that was what really made me like, okay, I got to get on it and start writing something. So the first thing that I was asked to write was short stories, and I'd really never written anything before. So, I just came up with these characters. It's about Junior, he's a native guy, and about Joy, that's his wife, and John, and he's the guy that Junior meets in school. So I had to hand something in. So I'm just thinking, okay, well, I'll just make up the story about these three people and their life being connected to each other, I had to come up with something. So that was the story, with just story about this goofy Indian guy that didn't know how to fish. He didn't know how to fish, and Joy, his wife, really loved fish, and so, that was kind of the basic part of the story. And then my friend John, who was like a white guy, outdoorsman, fisherman, hunter, he knew how to fish, and so there was this thing going on where she started liking John, and Junior had to step up, and it's just a kind of a start of like something, and then it turned into a series of some other small stories that came from that. Yeah,
and it's loosely autobiographical, correct? I mean,
yeah.
Okay, all right. Now the title Bear Tracks, and of course you are a Bear Clan elder. What more can you tell us about the title and how that relates to the whole memoir?
I think that when I submitted this work, well, let me start by saying that a lot of the stuff that's in the book I wrote like 20 years ago. Having no idea ever that it would be a book. Never. And so back then, I was just it was therapy for me. And so I just started writing, really personal stuff, like kind of like a diary or a journal, and the whole Bear Clan, being a Bear Clan member and a tribal elder and stuff. I just started kind of leaning towards that, and I think that I think that was just a good title. I mean, when we thought about it, and when the editors and stuff, we thought about like I like that. I like that Bear Track. It's like we came from hibernation and we woke up and here we are.
Uh-huh.
We're coming out and we're like starting a new life. So
sure, yeah. Now, Sherm, you grew up in a large family, and you weren't always in close contact with other natives. Tell me more about your upbringing and how it has influenced your writing.
Well, I'm one of 12 children born of Adam and Doris Stacy Funmaker. And, growing up, I mean, I did, like I said, I was a high school dropout. I hated school. I skipped more school than I probably attended. And so I wasn't like educated, or I wasn't a reader. I didn't ever read poetry or even short stories. I was just kind of a kid just trying to make it, in the world in the 60s, and just trying to grow up. And I think that when I started writing, I just started looking back, at my family, my grandmother, my parents, my siblings, and those stories just kind of started coming out. And a lot of them just came. They just, once, most writers, I think, once you kind of get in a groove, or any kind of artist, once you kind of get in that groove, then these stories just kept coming. So back in the day, I mean, that's when I started writing these. They were just easy to come up with. I'd look at pictures of my folks or my grandparents, or my family and friends or whatever, and I would just start writing about it, and never thinking it's going to be a book. Never. Like, okay, I'm just writing it because it felt good to write about it. It felt good to put it down on paper. And, and going back and reading them and kind of reminiscing about my memories with my cousin Joe, or with my mom and dad, or with, my grandmother, Stella Stacy, also known as Mountain Wolf Woman. So that's kind of where they came from. I think we're all storytellers. So I think that once we kind of tap into that, I think that they just start coming, so I think that's where they come from.
You mentioned your parents, and your father was raised in Winnebago, Nebraska, and he went on to become a star athlete. And your mother actually drove you to music gigs as a teen, and we're going to talk more about your music here shortly. But you actually, one of the poems is dedicated to your mom. It's titled Roadie, and we have time before the break. Can you read it for us?
Sure. Okay, so this is about my mom. It's called The Roadie. My radio put me to sleep most nights. Chicago, Little Rock, Oklahoma City, AM stations that kept me aware of what was going on outside my little world. They made me think of dreams that seemed so far away, starting out on pots and pans, banging my way into the world. Tunes that went on inside my head, telling me stories and leading me on. The garage housed more than a car, tinny and out-of-tune kids. Little amps pumped out top 40. Dreams of lights and music rocked us softly. She hauled my kit, set it up, and let me do my thing. Too young to drive, but old enough to see the plan. My mom was my biggest fan, always gave me what I needed, dried my tears and held me tight, letting me know there was so much more to life. The songs I sang were of love and peace. It made me feel like something like nothing else did. This Indian kid found his place in a world so sad and so full of hate. The end.
Good stuff. Really good stuff, Sherman.
Thanks.
Tell me more about what you learned from your parents growing up. Ho-Chunk culture, the people, and then just other life lessons.
I think just, they weren't really traditional. And I think, they taught us some stuff. They spoke the language. I was just being kind of a rebel growing up in the 50s and 60s. I wasn't interested in language or really culture. I was fully set on just playing rock music for the rest of my life. And so the lessons that they taught were just basic, like Christian, along that line, would just do good, be good, do good to people, be good to people, kind of just, that's how I saw them too. They were examples of like, yeah, we had hard times. Yeah, we struggled with drugs or drinking or whatever, but it was like at the end of the day, they were like always right. They were like right there holding us up and praying for us and wishing us the best and stuff. So I think that's where we got, I think that's where we got, our lessons was from them, watching them and, learning and, going to church and just, reading scriptures and stuff. So, that was a good thing.
Sherman Funmaker on our show today talking about his new memoir. It's titled Bear Tracks, Memories of a Ho-Chunk Elder. Listeners can join our conversation today. Give us a call. The number is 1-800-99-NATIVE. If you have a question for Sherman Funmaker or you just have a comment with regard to his new memoir, give us a call. Let us know. You can join this conversation. You can participate and be a part of our dialogue today on Native America Calling. We're going to continue our conversation with Sherman Funmaker. On the other side of this break, we're going to learn more about his music career as a drummer and a rock and roller. So stay with us.
A small espresso bar born from a family's grief is finding new success on Taos Pueblo in New Mexico. Dawn Butterfly Cafe just expanded to a full-service cafe showcasing owner C.J. Bernal's culinary talents. And it's time to harvest the bulbs of a western prairie wildflower plant that remains a traditional favorite food. Those are among the topics on the menu on the next Native America Calling.
Trickster Cultural Center, an authentic first voice of Native American cultural arts, invites community to the 2026 Summer Youth Powwow, rooted in the Native good life teachings of community, responsibility, culture, and connection. Open to the public, the Summer Youth Powwow uplifts youth leadership and community wellness through intertribal dancing, music, storytelling, and local resources for families and youth. May 30th from 2 to 7 p.m. in Schaumburg, Illinois. TricksterCulturalCenter.org supports this show.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, and we're speaking now with Ho-Chunk writer and Bear Clan elder Sherman Funmaker. His latest work, titled Bear Tracks, Memories of a Ho-Chunk Elder, is published by Wisconsin Historical Society Press, and it uses poetry to reflect on moments in his life. Later in the hour, we'll speak with Inupiaq poet Joan Kane about her latest work. And listeners can join us today with comments and questions by calling 1-800-996-2848. 1-800-996-2848. And you can also leave a comment on our website, nativeamericacalling.com, or any of our social media pages such as Facebook and Instagram. And Sherman, I want to talk more about your music. And I know as a teenager, when the British invasion took rock music and pop culture by storm, you were a part of that. You were there. You were present. How did that era impact you personally?
Oh, I think it was huge. I think it was big for many wannabe musicians When I saw the Beatles on TV, when I was 12 years old, that was like, that's what I want to do. It just made an impression on me. Like I think I was always like a musical guy. I always had this, I just like music. It was just a part of like something I could get into or something I could relate to or escape for 3 minutes, just thinking about these songs and what the message was in that song of love and peace or whatever it was. So, once I got involved in the music thing, then everything else would, I quit school. I was kind of an athlete and I quit doing that. All I wanted to do was just play music. And so that's what kind of started my journey. And my folks and my siblings and everybody was very supportive, and they just did everything they could to help me with that. So thank you guys.
Yeah, for sure, Sherman. Now, there is a photo in the memoir of you standing on the Brooklyn Bridge in 1985, and you've got a pearl drum brand shirt on. You look really, really cool. When did you start playing drums?
Right after that, probably like when I was about 14. I had my mom, my parents gave me drum lessons, and I had voice lessons too, because I wanted to sing, and I still try to sing a little bit, but yeah, so that was, I just started, that was the thing. And I picked it up really quick. That was the other thing too. So I hate sounding like it just came to me, but it just kind of came to me.
Uh-huh.
It was easy for me to do that. So yeah, so that's what I started doing, and it just took over my life, and I figured that's what in my little brain, I was just thinking this is what I'm supposed to be doing in life,
Sure,
and so
yeah.
So that with that thought, it just like drove me to like, okay, just keep on going, keep on keeping on.
And you met a lot of interesting people touring as a musician. You've played with a lot of different people in different parts of the country too.
Mostly in Wisconsin, no. Didn't. Yeah, mostly in Wisconsin. I hitchhiked to L.A. with my friend Steve when we were 19, and I got to play with a Christian orchestra there. And actually, we worked at Capitol Records. We were in the same studio that the Beatles recorded in, so that was quite a thrill. But I don't have any proof of that. I don't have pictures or anything like that. So you just have to take my word for it. It was cool.
We will.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned your Christian faith, and that's another recurring theme in Bear Tracks. And you actually have a poem that I really enjoyed reading, Indian Baptist Church, and it reflects on your memories of a Sunday service. So tell me more about how your faith has guided you throughout your life.
I think that it's something that, to me, it was always there, I guess. And I'm not sure. I think that, when I was a kid, I went to a movie with my dad, and it was The King of Kings. It was a movie in the 50s. And I remember kind of asking my dad, he got like really emotional watching this movie, and so I asked him, about, where do we come from? Those kind of questions. And he just, he said, God made you. And that just like stuck with me, that was it, like God made you. Wow. Okay. That kind of got me going. That kind of got me thinking about, about God and church. And so, I got saved. I came to know the Lord when I was 19 years old. And I still, to this day, I remember that moment like it was yesterday, and I still follow that and strive every day to do the best that I can, reading the scriptures and talking to people, witnessing to people. So it's become a big part of my life and our family, all of our siblings, my mom and dad, before they went on, they met the Lord and they were became very devout. So big part of life.
Sherman, there are two poems in the memoir. One is titled Blue Eyes and the other is titled Old Friends. And they describe your first love as a teenager. And what's so cool is that you actually reconnected with this woman many years later. And I'm interested in learning more. What's your message to readers of any age who contemplate love and romance?
When I first started writing, first of all, I didn't write I didn't know how to write. I didn't know how to write a story or poetry. And I thought, poetry. That's for like old rich white people. You know, you know what I mean? I had no idea what poetry, and I think that when I started writing, I just to myself, I thought, well, what do people, you know, what can people relate to? You know, they can relate to love. Okay, they can relate to hate. They can relate to, you know, they can relate to life and death, and you know, and so I just started writing about that, and it was about a girlfriend that we met when we were kids, and we reconnected after like 40 years, and she's like been my best friend like for most of my life, you know, just always there for me, and we just remained friends, you know. We're just you know, it's just that connection that we had, you know, way back when, and I'm sure people people remember their first love, or the person that really, really did something in their life to, you know. So I think that it was easy for me to go there, and a lot of stuff that I read that's in there, it talks about like that. It talks about, you know, like I said, this was therapy for me when I was writing these stories or writing these poems. So it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't trying to, try to make you think that I was intellectual or deep or smart. I was just writing because that's what, you know, was in my heart or in my mind at the time. Like, I'm just going to write this down, never thinking it's going to be in a book and people are going to read it. But so I think that's, you know, that I think people can relate to love and you know, hurt and pain and alone and being in despair and being by themselves. So it was an easy place to go to and an easy place to find my writing in those subjects.
And Sherman, because this writing has primarily been a form of therapy for you, and you didn't ever anticipate that you'd ever publish it, was it difficult for you, or did you have any hesitation before sharing some of these personal stories with the public?
I kind of did, because it's so personal. I kind of did, but you know what? I have all these writings that I've done for the last 25 years or 23 years. And they were just piling up, basically. And I started writing I got a couple of plays, and I wrote a screenplay, and I wrote treatment for a movie. And they just were sitting around. So I thought, I got to do something with these. I don't have kids. I don't have somebody I can hand them down to, you know. So I was just thinking, I better at least self-publish, at least put them in some kind of form where I can leave them for my friends and family and stuff. So, and then along comes the Historical Society, and they read some, and they look at my website, and they go, "Hey, we can do a book for you." So I was like, "Okay, let's do a book." So next thing you know, a year later, my book comes out, and I'm just like, "Wow, can't believe it." It's hard to believe. It's really like, wow, you wrote a book? I mean, it's just, I don't know. Never ever think of that, but I'm like I said, I'm just really thankful for the school and for the tribe. They funded my education, my siblings, my mom and dad, and all the people, my relatives and stuff that were so helpful and so supportive. And, I just can't thank people enough for letting this come out and being a part of this supportive people that I have in my life.
Right on, Sherman. We're going to transition here in just a moment to our next guest. But before we do, I want to ask you about some of the book readings you've done and related events for Bear Tracks. And what's been the response so far from readers?
Really good. I mean, I think that the most, what I'd like to, what I hear from like my relatives and siblings or whatever is that, they laughed and they cried. And that was like enough for me, like, yeah, okay. It rang true. And I think that now when I run into people that have read the book, they go, I can relate to that. I can relate to my mom and my dad and my grandparents, and I can relate to love and being heartbroken or being alone, so it's just really been a good response, So yeah, thank you all for out there for your support.
Sherman, thank you for coming on the show today,
yes,
sharing your talents and your gifts with our listeners, and just continued success moving forward, brother.
That's been my pleasure, man. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to Ms. Kane's readings, too. I was checking her out, so she does some very cool stuff. So Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with that, let's go ahead and bring our next guest into the conversation, Joan Kane, who joins us on Zoom from Portland, Oregon, where she is the chair and professor of creative writing at Reed College and is also the author of With Snow Pouring Southward Past the Window. She is Inupiaq. Joan, good morning and welcome back to Native America Calling. Great to have you on the show today.
Good morning, and what a pleasure to get to hear and talk about poetry and writing today. Thanks so much for having us on.
Yeah, you bet. Now, in your latest collection here, you write about family, you write about your home, you talk about colonization. Let's begin with the title, though, With Snow Pouring Southward Past the Window. How was it inspired by an email you received?
Oh, this is a deep cut. Yeah, I would say I think it's important to keep in mind that everyone comes to writing and comes to language in our relationship to poetry, to storytelling, to sharing our knowledge in different ways. And for me, I took a little bit of a hard path, but one of the teachers who really helped me on my way was the late Jean Valentine, and I think part of the reason why she helped me so much is because I had spent most of my life kind of in predominantly white institutions for my education and my higher education, and was having these difficulties in some of my writing workshops where people expected my poems or things that I wrote to sort of be read as anthropological texts rather than literary works. And we developed a really close friendship after I took a workshop with her, and she kind of let me have the permission and freedom to allow my relationship to the poem and to literary forms as sort of as a way to be free from the expectations and burdens that non-native readers kind of bring to the work of native writers. And our friendship really developed too after I moved back to Alaska after grad school, where she taught me, and we stayed in close touch over email. And she herself had two kids 2 years apart as I did, and she signed off an email to me with snow pouring eastward past the window at a time when we were supposed to meet up together along with the poet Brian Tier in the Philadelphia area. And I thought about how at that time in 2015, 2016, living in Alaska, but traveling a lot, thinking about my own complicity in climate change and sort of my carbon footprint, and the kinds of change in how and where winter appears, or Arcticity, or themes of the Arctic appear. And so after she passed away, I thought about that sort of iambic pentameter line, and sort of the effortlessness that even her emails kind of gave me poems at times when I wasn't finding a lot of lyricism in the rest of my life. So that's kind of where the title comes from. It also comes from, and I think a lot of people in Alaska, particularly people who are off the road system, can relate. This feeling of when you are departing or leaving your community, and you might be kind of trying to keep your eye on the land and the water around your home community, or a place that you're really connected to, for as long as you can. And the feeling of seeing like the marine layer of clouds and of snow kind of obscure in some ways what you can see of the land as you are flying away from it. So that's kind of where the title came from, which is a really long-winded answer. So yeah, I think I'll stop there for the title explanation.
No, I love all those details. It really helps, put this all into context for our listeners. And there are several poems in the collection that are written in Inupiat, and that's actually common throughout your work and in your career. And I'm interested in learning more, though, how your fluency, and specifically the King Island dialect, has grown over the years, and what it takes to actually write in Inupiat.
Well, I'll have to say first that I'm really indebted to a lot of the knowledge bearers and scholars, and language scholars in particular, who have worked and devoted their life's work to not just their jobs, but actual like vocations to the King Island dialect and also to the diversity of dialects, the Inupiaq languages and dialects that are spoken across all of the Arctic and subarctic. And so I would say one thing that was really important to me and was having, when I lived in Alaska, always having relatives living with us so that my children would hear the Yup'ak language and King Island dialect spoken, not just by my mom and by me, but also by some of my other relatives, say if they were coming to do their undergrad years in Anchorage, live with us, and also thinking about how specifically the work of a language scholar, Anouk Olin, and her master's degree work that she was doing at MIT at the same time that I moved to Cambridge with my kids in 2019, and thinking about the small Inupiatan circles that we were able to make, but thinking especially of another Inupiaq writer, Kathy Taranaq Rexford, who even now I still have a lot of the Inupiatan resources that my children were raised with. I think one thing that has changed in recent years is kind of thinking through the ways that information is available digitally. I think it's important to me to be corrected when I am bringing things into print that are wrong. I feel like sometimes I'm making a mistake, or I'm reaching for trying to work particularly in this book across dialects in ways that I think I don't have the skill set to do. And I think as in my life, as my mom,
Joan, we're going to take a short break. Joan,
Sure.
we'll come back and continue our conversation. And listeners, please stay with us. And the phone lines are open if you'd like to join us.
Support from Davis Keelan Law Firm, a New Mexico firm standing with Native families suffering catastrophic loss. When tragedy strikes Indian country, Davis Keelan fights to restore stability, dignity, and justice, bringing a voice to Native families and communities for 20 years. More information, daviskeelan.com.
Need an actionable plan to achieve your goals? Kaufman & Associates strengthens Native organizations through culturally grounded strategic planning. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
You are listening to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, and let's continue now our conversation with Inupiaq poet Joan Kane. And she is talking about her latest collection of poems titled With Snow Pouring Southward Past the Window. It's published by the University of Pittsburgh Press. Listeners can tune into this show and all past shows by going to our website, nativeamericacalling.com, or any of your most popular podcast platforms carry our show as well, nativeamericacalling.com. And you can listen as well or call in at 1-800-996-2848. And Joan, I'm sorry we had to take a quick break there, but you were giving our listeners a little bit more background on the King Island dialect and also how you write in Inupiat.
Yeah, I think I think one thing I will emphasize is that my mom really, when we lived in Alaska, my mom really made an effort with my kids every single time she was with them. She knew that she would teach them 5 words in our dialect, have them write them down, and also what it meant in English, and then also make an entire phrase or statement from it. So I'm thinking about the late elders Joe and Ron Sanungatuk, who my grandfather helped teach to carve and work with in Nome. And I'm thinking about how Ron Sanungatuk about 18 years ago told me that it was good that I was working with writing, what he called baby Inupiatan, and good on working with that with my kids. And he said, the kind of Inupiaq that your grandfather spoke, it was like Shakespeare's English. So when I work with the language now, and when I look to various print resources and also other archival resources, and being respectful of elders in my family and in my community, as well as other language learners, I'm really I think I'm willing to make mistakes as I use the language, but also think about how the richness and fullness of the King Island dialect of the Newpak language, and thinking about that as my goal in life is to be able to maybe have some of the ease and facility with my own language that my grandfather, my mother's father, had, and that my grandmother, my mother's mother, had across many dialects of the Newpak language.
Joan, let's go ahead and have you read one of your poems from the book. It's titled "Turning Back," and it has to do with displacement. So go ahead and read it for our listeners, and then we'll talk about it some more.
Sure. Turning back. I wish to be closer to my mother, to think of displacement in a different way. Depart, the bright green new growth of a plant she has asked me to gather. We never imagined so many years apart. I have no way to make amends. Set adrift, I wanted to stay near the shore of something familiar, but instead I traced the shape of Tugayuk, sea lovage, wild celery, with something other than my tongue. I wish for my family to be its own refuge, for the sorrow to become something islandic. Someplace we can travel back to together if we have to, if we make it through these days.
Yeah, Joan. Now, you've written about displacement in other poems as well, and specifically the 1960s era urban Indian relocation program that incentivized Native people to move to cities. Why is that consistently a recurring theme in your work?
I think it's consistently a recurring theme because, until, my grandfather, who did not speak a word of English, supported a family of 11 children who survived into adulthood entirely by hunting marine mammals on the moving sea ice in the Bering Sea. And I think of how my mom's upbringing was shaped by being sent to a Catholic boarding school, Copper Valley, in the interior of Alaska, and also my grandmother's life, how she and her sisters walked from Mary's Igloo, the reindeer camp at Mary's Igloo in 1919, to the to the orphanage at Pilgrim Hot Springs, Unatak, on the Seward Peninsula, and so. Although I use the pronoun I in this poem, I think in a lot of my poems, I'm also thinking through my namesake Nivayuk and my Avazak, those that share the same namesake. And I'm thinking about how and I guess over the course of my work, not just displacement as it figures in my autobiographical life, but actually that, historically, traditionally, our King Islanders are people who have traveled long distances, who established trade networks, all across the areas of the Bering Sea and the Chukchi and Arctic Ocean. How much we traveled. So I think in some ways. I think in some poems I'm working with the idea of displacement, but I'm also thinking, autobiographically, but I'm also thinking about how movement and how connection and how our kin networks are really established by choosing to move across the world. I think the other part for me is that as a native woman in this time, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. The situation of being unhoused is not distant from me. It's something that is really close to my family's experience. It's really close to my own experience, and especially in Alaska, with the impacts, I think, of Typhoon Halong. I think we're seeing how displacement and movement to other areas is really becoming a lot more pronounced as a pressure that we see and face in Alaska and everywhere as Native people.
And you have a number of poems that reference Anchorage, Alaska specifically, and you've already mentioned issues like boarding school history, and there have been hate crimes toward Alaska Natives in this part of the country. And we heard Sherman earlier mention how for him writing poetry is often a form of therapy, and I'm interested in hearing how poetry helps you confront some of these policies and these historical issues and how you explain those to other people.
Yeah, I think I have so much respect for people who come to the page in whatever way makes sense for them. I will say for me, therapy is therapy for me. And when I come to the page as a writer, I come as an artist. So I also really kind of look to the poem, and especially the lyric poem, as a place where I'm not beholden to narrative only. I think about the songs of King Island people. I think about our traditions, all the knowledge that's encoded in those songs, and so I guess I think about the role of lyric poetry in my life as an artist, and in my other life as a teacher, as a mom, and I think about the site of the lyric poem as a place not necessarily for something therapeutic, but to raise questions and take a different kind of perspective on themes, on images, on sort of on places that people can understand and sort of relate to. So I think that's something important that I want to say. And I also I've been thinking about it and thinking about why I turned to poetry. And I think I've always been aware that language has a lot of power, and I'm interested in understanding how to allow, especially and help all Native people, but especially Native people who are inclined to think through literature as art, as a way to ask questions or spend time with things that matter to them in ways that might not necessarily have some sort of direct, I will say, like therapeutic impact.
Okay.
That I'm always thinking about poetry as art, and literature as art. And so as something as it may be for me, complex and mysterious, and something I don't always understand, and being okay with that.
Right. Yeah. Joan, we have time for one more poem, and this one is titled Portland. And I'm excited for this one because I know we talked a little bit before the show about what it's like living in Portland and how you feel about it, and comparing it, of course, to Anchorage and other parts of Alaska. So go ahead. Let's hear it for our listeners.
Sure. I will say it starts and ends with lines from the poet Elizabeth Bishop. So I'll read that epigraph, and then the last lines are also part of that. Portland, January 1, 2025. Each out to catch an Indian for himself. Those maddening little women who kept calling. January's nature follies our senses somewhat as she gritted theirs with firework. Dread of the smoke, loud, dark, and how it would reek of greed to rise with the slow poem of the new year, with a voice I mistook for a grave I wanted to walk into. Now I know, like a willow grove, like a kelp grove, like a birch grove, a spruce grove, like Angelica and the hemlock, where the paper bark boats should spin away on the wind after fire, wallowing after flood, after the ash grave, and under such ash paper as I called to my mother, and never having reached her, reaching, always calling to each other, or had the birds waked up, and retreating, always retreating behind it.
Mm. Joan, what do you think of Portland now? You know, it's gotten so much attention in the media, lots of changes there. What's it like for you? And again, comparing that to your home in Alaska.
Well, I think for me, Portland has always been a place where King Islanders and King Island people have found themselves. And I think back to 2009, when I was working in a job that I needed to come to Portland for training, and I brought my mom and my older kid. And we were able to reunite my mom with two elders, one Olga Maktoya Kingston, who was relocated to Portland in the 1960s, and then I also think of Marie Tutayuna Dawson, who my mom had not seen since 1960. And how Marie survived and lived here in Portland, unhoused for many decades. And when my mom was reunited with her two relatives after so many years, I don't know. I think when I think of Portland and I think of the way that Portland has always had a more pronounced issue with unhoused populations, and especially how disproportionately that impacts Native people. I will say that I'm reminded of Anchorage and the precarity of surviving in places that are predominantly white. That's been a challenge, but I'm also really heartened by a lot of the activism that I see in young people here. I think of the high school that Native students are working to try to rename the Cleveland High School to reflect a different kind of history. So I think Portland is a place that is aware of its histories, but I'm still trying to figure out the way to reconcile with some of its responsibilities, not just to Native people, but also to sort of its own legacies of segregation and racial exclusion. I mean, it's only been in the last couple of decades that Portland actually is by law not subject to racial exclusion laws. So that's something that I think is really that I note. I think it's good to be closer to Alaska, but at the same time, we're seeing that air travel and traveling anywhere is becoming a lot more fraught and complicated. But I think there are things in Portland that give me hope, and I think there are things that Native communities can work on together.
Joan, we're going to have to wind down the show here in a couple of minutes, but I want to ask you so far, what kind of feedback are you getting for With Snow Pouring Southward Past the Window? And what other projects are you working on for the future?
Oh yeah, I think so far I think with this book I've gotten people saying, "Oh, this is really different from your other work," which perplexes me a little bit because I think as a poet I feel like I'm writing the same poem my whole life. I think I was more inclined to think through received texts, and working through some documents that kind of have really shaped my life in the past couple of years and in my relationship to King Island. I think some of the things that I'm working on right now is continuing to make sure that a recent anthology that I worked on with a lot of other Native writers and artists, and circumpolar connections, that we can get it into the hands of people in Arctic and subarctic communities. I have another book coming out later this year, another collection of poetry. I have an essay collection that will be published by an Alaska-based press that kind of takes all my essays that have been published separately and brings them all together back into print. So those are some of the things I'm working on right now, but really just looking forward to spending some time in Alaska this summer and traveling with artists from the Saha Republic. So that's something that I'm really excited about.
Joan, thanks for coming on the show today, and continued success, and just wonderful, wonderful conversation, and you're inspirational. And you definitely, when I read your poetry, it just like fires off like different thought processes in my mind. And that's what I really value with good writing, is it makes me think and makes me contemplate in a way that I've never thought before. So thank you for sharing your gifts.
Iligan, thank you. Thanks for having us on today.
Absolutely. With that, we're out of time, folks. We're going to have to wrap it up. But first, we do want to thank our guests who joined the show today, Joan Kane and also Sherman Funmaker. And please tune in again tomorrow as we hear about the bulbs of a wildflower that are traditional food this time of year on Western prairies. That and other Native food topics are on the menu with Andy Murphy. I'm your host, Sean Spruce, and we'll talk again soon.
Tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, share progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Who protects Indian country? Amerant does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerant helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerant is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerant.com. That's AMERIND.com.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.